Except for I'm terrible at this question. I don't have a favorite episode. I like to watch episodes before I've hit puberty. And I think that's really reasonable. And I have fond memories of episodes where unusual things happen, and I think a lot of you will feel the same way. So if I had to do a stunt, or if, like when the house burned down, like that was just exciting to film. We filmed at night, which wasn't typical. We filmed with lots of special effects, and the firefighters were there. And so when things were, it was fun when they had, like the Christmas Carol was fun because my little brother was in that episode, and then the girl who played his sister was my age, so we could hang out and have fun together. So those were really, and you can see none of these things are about the story. Right? They're all about the experience making it.
Yeah, I concur. It really is, when someone says what was your favorite episode, I always say, well, was it favorite for us to film, or was it the favorite one to watch as a post-produced piece? And then there's the other part where that's the Easter story was the last episode that they showed in the first year. And if you look at the rise of the ratings and the emotions that we had that first year, we started in the very last place in September of 1972. And when the nominations came out the week of the Easter story, and we got, 11 Emmy nominations, and we were #1, it was like, there was such an emotional thing for us that we beat our competition. We beat, Mod Squad, Flip Wilson, and I knew we were going to get another year out of this. So
a second year of college for you?
That's right. So I was looking at that, to me was like the ultimate wow. But there's some of the episodes, I look at them and they were just wonderful, wonderful episodes to watch. I didn't watch, it wasn't like I'd go home and watch every one of them every week and that thing. Honestly, I would look at the ones that I had a lot in, just to see how the editing ended up more than anything, because I always am curious to see what an editor saw in my performance and how it ended up on the film, to see if he had the same ideas that I had in the portrayal of it. I don't know if that makes any sense to you all, but it was more of a technical thing. But yeah, I liked whenever Ben had a large part.
Those were my favorite episodes too. And Ben had a lot to do. It was good for me. So people ask us that question a lot, and I think it is fun when the house burned down, and then you can also it was. And all, that sort of thing. But then you also think about the episodes that had a huge impact on the world. And so you say, oh, well, there's the book burning episode. And everybody gasps, and then as they remember it. And so there are episodes that, growing as an actress, mattered to me. The first casualty where GW died. That was a really big episode for me, and I loved it. And I think when I got to be older and do things that affected people in real life. So when the first casualty happened, there was a man that came through an autograph line at one point and said that he saw that episode, and he was in charge of military operations, and he made a vow that no boy would ever die in his training program. And in 27 years at that point, no one had ever been injured. And that's pretty impactful. Doesn't have very much to do with me, but it's pretty amazing to hear those stories. And then when Aaron dated John Boy's friend who came back from the war, and he was in a wheelchair, I got a lot of letters from Vietnam vets. And they said, I hope everybody watches this show because I too am in a wheelchair, and I wish there was an Aaron in my town who would date me. And I'm so glad that you went on a date with that guy. And so that's the kind of stuff that really impacts me. And it's not, it has nothing to do with me, but it's just about being able to portray something that somebody else wrote and to have it impact someone and have it make a difference. So I think that's...
some of them have been covered. You know, I usually feel like I have a top 3 in terms of shows. The one where the house burned down, I think, you know, in fact, we all had
Most fun ever.
Yeah, I mean, it was just the Waltons was not known for its special effects or action or anything like that. So it was just kind of an interesting, different sort of experience for us. And when we filmed one night on a Friday on the back lot of Warner Brothers Studios, and they had all these flames, you know, set up to, you know, coming out of the windows of the house, and we had, I don't know how there ended up being all these like people who came to watch that weren't part of our show, but people were like hanging out. Yeah, really hoping the house really burned. But yeah, all these people, there was all these visitors, all these looky-loos on the back lot of the studio watching our house burn. But it was so realistic, you know, for us that it was like really easy to shoot. The emotion of the scene. So that one, I think, yeah, we all tend to talk about.
Didn't you actually think that Richard and I were stuck in there?
No, there was just a moment, like we were all out front and we were all pretending to cry and the house was on fire, like, you know, acting. And then when the screen door slammed open and there was this like billow of smoke, and out came Richard with Mary slumped in his arms, and I lost it. Like just for a beat, it just all became real, and I was like,
And I thought there was going to be more lines for me.
And I think you said my name. I think you called me Mary in that. Yeah.
Well,
I was on fire.
Yeah, so that one clearly impacted us all. For me, another one was also the Easter story. I thought it was such fun to when I had to teach GW to dance, and John Boy taught me to dance, and we were, you know, it was just fun stuff, you know, dancing up in the snow, you know, Fraser Park on location, and you know, and GW couldn't dance at all. I mean, you know, I was a decent dancer, but it was like literally like, okay, here we go. I just thought it was a lovely story. The book burning. Who remembers the actual name of that episode?
Firestorm.
Thank you. I can never remember it. But it was that one was such a dramatic scene with Richard and John Ritter, who was just such a joy to work with. And for a man who was so brilliant at comedy, you know, he was also such a brilliant dramatic actor, and that scene to me, it was just so heart-wrenching. And I thought the message of it was so important and is still important. So that one always stood out for me. But then, like some of the others said, sometimes it was the fun stuff. Like, it was not a particularly good episode, but I loved the horse race because I'm a horse person. And poor Mary got dragged into it. You know, this was like art imitating life, because the producers knew that I was totally into sports. I really was a tomboy, and I jumped horses, still do.
And they said to me, Judy's going to be on the horse the whole time. You're going to do the running part. And I'm like, I can do that. Judy's never on the horse.
And she was
hey,
the
Mary,
one.
get on the horse. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Judy's doing the horse part.
When we ran up the hill, and I'm like, tail me, and she had to grab the tail of the horse and get dragged up the hill. I'm like, I wouldn't have done that, and I'm a horse person. I'm like, I know you don't get behind a horse. That's right. I'm like, but she didn't know enough to know that wasn't a smart idea. She's like, they said they wrote it, so I'm like, hey, here we go, and she did it. But it was such fun for me to get to show up at work every day and hop on a horse and, you know, and ride. But I mean, I wouldn't say I thought it was a particularly good episode, but it sure was fun to film, because again, we didn't get to do action. So I always wanted to do action movies, you know, being a tomboy. I went, when do I get to, like, you know, be an action hero? And I thought you know, there weren't a lot of female action heroes in the 70s, but I think I would have been, you know, like, I think you know, I missed my calling. I was just a little late in the cycle of, you know, movies and action. But anyway, those were some of my most memorable episodes.
Like someone said, a lot of the things that we remember when we watch an episode is not necessarily something in the episode, but remembering something that happened that week, something we did that day. Oh yeah, that was the day we had the lunch at the Mexican restaurant. Or, oh, that that was the day we saw Barry Manilow at IHOP, you know, that kind of thing. The horse race, was that the one where John Boy rode the mule in the horse race? Okay, so that was
This
a
was the
different
run and ride race.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jonathan Banks was in it though.
Yeah.
He was pretty
okay.
cool.
That was the one where John Boy.
Rode the Mule was
Ends up-
the thoroughbred with Kathleen Quinlan.
Right.
Yeah.
He ends up winning the race on the mule because it's kind of like a no rules race, and he's able to go through the high country and over rocks and, you know, kind of over the top of the mountain, which was no problem for the mule being sure-footed, you know, where the racehorse couldn't do that. So again, that episode I remember. I don't know if you all remember this, but do you remember that there was a scene where John Boy has to put the saddle on the mule for the first time,
Yes.
and the mule is supposed to freak out. Well, we had this wonderful mule, and you know, mules are great animals anyway, but our mule was typical in that it was just really a lovely animal and very calm. And we used to play with the mule between takes. We would kind of take it out, and it never had a saddle on it. And Eric and I would try to run, and like Roy Rogers, you know, we were trying to be Roy Rogers in the back lot and jump on the mule, right? You tried to jump on from the back, right?
I remember doing that at the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah, on stage.
I
Yes.
didn't make it, but you know,
Well,
it's fun to watch.
That's another story. We were part of a live production on stage at the Hollywood Bowl that Will Gear put together, which was, the best way I can describe it was the Walton cast doing Macbeth.
And I was Puck.
The name of the show, of our little skit, was called As Y'all Like It. And I remember when we made our exit from the stage, you tried to jump on the mule and slid off, and tried again and slid off, and then you just kind of went, no, I didn't forget it. And we all went off. But on the set, when we did the scene where John Boy tried to put the saddle on the mule for the first time, the problem was you could do anything with this mule. I mean, it was just a sweet, gentle, calm animal.
And the mule was supposed to be afraid of the saddle
It's
because he
supposed to
hadn't
be-
seen one.
And supposed to run away.
Right.
How do you get a nice mule to run away?
He's afraid of nothing.
You get.
Well, so the wrangler, the cowboy fellow whose job it was to take care of the animals, said, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." He said, "It's well known that," he had a great voice, Rudy Ugly. "Well, it's well known that mules are afraid of camels." Camels. Camels. So yeah, there was some kind of war way back, you know, in the Middle East, and then the army that was on camels won because the horses were all afraid and ran away. So I got a plan. Now, Richard, when you put the saddle on the mule, we're gonna have the camel behind the barn, and just as the saddle goes on the mule's back, I'm gonna lead the camel around the side of the barn, and that mule's just gonna take off. Well, so that's what we did. Richard picked up the saddle. He started to put it on the back of the mule, and then the camel came around the side of the barn, and the mule looked kind of confused, like, what the heck is that? And kind of like, kind of backed away slowly, but it certainly wasn't the big reaction they were looking for. So, the wrangler and all these other technicians and the director kind of went, oh shoot. We're dead. What do we do now? So we tried this several times with the mule. It didn't get better. Every time the mule came around, the camel got more and more used to it. It was kind of like, oh, him again. So I think it was Ed Villa, our craft service man, said, he was kind of like a Barney Rubble character. He said, so why don't we just try banging some trash can lids together? So Richard came out, started to put the saddle on the mule. Villa went, boom, 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 boom. like a symphony, cymbal player, and the mule took off like a shot.
I'm glad I wasn't there that
Oh.
day.
And you thought it was all well planned.
That's a totally true story.
It's true.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So Michael talked
we're
back.
we're working on the set every day. We're all there. On the days when we're not working, we're still going because we had 3 hours of school to do. So anyway, we were there every day, and one of the things that we looked forward to the most were guest stars, because that would be the one thing that wasn't a constant. There would be obviously a new story, but with the new story, there would be new guest stars coming in. So there were certain people that we really loved working with. Most of them we loved working with, and some that we really looked forward to meeting and working with. And for me, there was an episode with Ron Howard, who played my best friend. I loved that. Great experience. There was a sequel to that episode with Merle Haggard playing his dad. Another great experience, especially for me, because Merle was a music legend, and we got to hang out and play guitar on the set, which, annoyed the crew, and they told us to shut up. So, and like Judy mentioned, John Ritter, always loved having John on the set. Not only was he a great actor, but he was a lovely guy, and he made us all laugh till we were in tears, all the time. He and Richard especially were funny together, and they used to do things when one was having a close-up, doing a close-up, the other one would be off camera doing God knows what, anything.
They were naughty.
Can I tell
Really
one,
naughty.
one of their
please.
favorite things,
Jump
apart
in.
from mooning, but we won't go there, and Will Gear included, you haven't lived to this. But they used to like to chew on makeup pads, those little, they're like spongy, yeah. So they would chew on those for about an hour and a half, and then when it was time for somebody's close-up, they'd start foaming at the mouth. It was so charming.
And Michael,
It's just one of the few things.
I don't know if Will really if he was really just showing his butt, or if he just didn't put on his clothes.
He just didn't put on his suspenders. No, he was showing his everything. An event to be remembered forever.
I think you can Google that, by the way.
Yes, you can watch it on YouTube.
I think there's like a blotchy ball that appears on screen at the appropriate moment to cover the sensitive areas.
Well, truly, he was a
quite sensitive.
he was a very natural person. Very natural.
Michael, what's your favorite episode? I actually don't.
I don't really have a favorite. Anyone where I wasn't pouring coffee was my favorite. But I actually want to talk about Patricia Neal, because I think The Homecoming as a film is a classic, and I think it will last forever. I'm so sorry I wasn't in it, but I'm so glad Patricia Neal was in it, because she was magnificent. And when they asked me to do it, they showed me The Homecoming, and I thought what an honor it would be for me to be in this as a series. But would it hold up for a mother to be that strict every week for an hour? And they said, no, soften her up a little bit. So the first year I was much more stringent than I was in preceding years. And besides, I fell in love with these people, and I still am today. But Patricia Neal, I said, she became a friend of mine. I was in the Russian tea room, and I heard this booming voice. And this woman who was severely impaired from her stroke came over slowly to where we were sitting. And, it was Patricia Neal, a movie star who was in, and by then I had done the Waltons, so I really knew who she was, but I'd never met her. She came across to meet me, which I thought was so incredibly gracious. And years later, we became close friends, and I said, you know, I'm so grateful that you didn't want to do that show, because it put my kids through private school and it gave me a whole new career. And she said, oh, but darling, I did. They never asked me. And she,
The plot
it
thickens.
wasn't until then that I even knew she had never brought it up. She had been so gracious and friendly, and she was a magnificent human being.